afternoon or good morning or good evening for whoever is checking this out. Whenever you check this out, let me check for audio real quick. Audio looks good. Let's get right into the readings. For further details, just check the description box, also for links. Let's see here. So the first article for today, headline. Let's see. This is where we're at. Okay, article reads as follows. More militarization, more deportation. Harris and Trump united against immigrants. Article by Mason Poirier, October 14th, 2024. The article reads as follows. The Harris and Trump campaigns are competing with each other to be seen as the one who will be more anti-immigrant. If there's something in my teeth, it's because I've been eating chocolate chip cookies. Please don't judge me. Back to the article. While Trump has touted ludicrous, racist, and completely false horror stories about immigrants, Harris is staking her campaign on, quote, border security, end quote, demilitarization of the border and deportation of immigrants. Her campaign has released ads filled with cops and border patrol agents bragging about her role in backing, quote, the toughest border control bill in decades, end quote. Trump's promise mass deportation. Trump's platform on immigration is horrific. His platform promises that he will carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, end quote. If enacted, this would include the massive use of police and military personnel to conduct state violence on organized communities. Trump also promises to end a variety of rights for undocumented immigrants, including due process and birthright citizenship. In his platform, Trump also promises to deport people for holding pro-Palestinian views, whom he refers to as being, quote, pro-Hamas radicals, end quote, while advocating for other ideological screenings for aspiring immigrants. Finally, he promises full reinstatement of several of the anti-immigrant policies from his first term, like the border wall and the, quote, Muslim ban, end quote, the discriminatory travel ban on travelers from multiple Muslim majority countries. Many of these policies were not actually ended after he left. A Trump presidency would undoubtedly lead to major rollbacks of civil rights. Even if Trump is not elected, state governors such as Greg Abbott have unleashed racist policies, state terror through measures such as the SB4, quote, show me your papers, end quote, bill signed into law last year. Harris, outflanking Trump from the right. Until recently, Harris has been mostly out of the public eye after her embarrassing 2021 anti-immigration tour to Central America, where she told immigrants, quote, do not come, you will be turned back, end quote. The callous language and tone of her pronouncement was one of the factors leading to her sidelining as a main face of the administration. Her rushed appointment to the presidential ticket after Biden dropped out has now brought her anti-immigrant history back into view. The Harris campaign's platform is comparatively sparse, but her rhetoric reveals goals and methods surprisingly similar to Trump's. She routinely brags about backing a partisan anti-immigrant bill, which her campaign ads call, quote, the toughest border control bill in decades, end quote. This bill would have allowed the federal government to, quote, summarily deport migrants who enter between ports of entry without permitting them to apply for asylum, end quote. In other words, a mass deportation of refugees that violates international law. The bill was almost passed in February, but Trump used his power over the Republican Party to block the bill in the Senate, fearing that this would undercut his own immigration platform in the coming election. Harris has consistently promised to revive this bill once she enters the White House. In essence, Harris and Walz' promise to the United States is that they will be more effective at enforcing Donald Trump's racist border policies than Donald Trump. Both corporate parties have swung to the far right on immigration. It's not difficult to imagine what a Kamala Harris border policy would look like. She has already presided over 4 years of the Biden-Harris border militarization. Most of the policies conducted by the first Trump administration were maintained and advanced under Biden. For instance, Biden continued building the highly unpopular and environmentally destructive border wall while conducting almost as many deportations as Trump. Nor have the many ICE detention facilities, once correctly denounced as cruel and inhumane by Democrats, been closed. Harris and her wing of the ruling class preferred to lend bipartisan legitimacy to their anti-immigrant policies to contrast with Trump's crudely racist platform, but the end result is the same. The cause of the so-called, quote, refugees crisis, end quote, is imperialism and capitalism. As the U.S. destabilizes much of the world with wars, sanctions, and coups against progressive governments, and capitalism-driven climate change intensifies, millions of people will seek to flee the country in the crosshairs. The most powerful weapon of the U.S. establishment has been divide and conquer tactics to scapegoat immigrants and refugees as servants of the capitalist class. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are dedicated to this system. What is truly needed is a united working class, anti-imperialist movement that rejects this racist onslaught by both corporate parties. This must be united around a bold platform, a recognition that imperialist meddling in the cause of the refugee crisis, border militarization, and deportation are an attack on human rights. And the real solution is to reinvest the almost $1 trillion per year war budget into housing, healthcare, education, jobs, and environmental protection for all. The socialist campaign of Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia is running on a platform of this type. The campaign has promised to end imperialist terror waged on the rest of the world by the U.S. empire, cutting the military budget by 90% and closing the over 800 military bases scattered by the United States around the planet. These crucial resources can then be reinvested back into society for the benefit of all. At the same time, De la Cruz and Garcia are running on the promise of full legal status and equal rights to all immigrants. The Democrats and Republicans have shown that they are incapable of addressing the compounding crisis facing working class Americans. They are out of ideas and have resorted to age-old tactics of racist fear-mongering and working class division. It is precisely this vulgar extreme swing to the right by the U.S. political establishment that makes the need to organize outside the narrow confines of these two corporate parties, building a truly independent people's movement so necessary. Let me read that last paragraph again. The Democrats and Republicans have shown that they are incapable of addressing the compounding crisis facing working class Americans. They are out of ideas and have resorted to age-old tactics of racist fear-mongering and working class division. It is precisely this vulgar extreme swing to the right by the U.S. political establishment that makes the need to organize outside the narrow confines of these two-party corporate parties, building a truly independent people's movement, so necessary. All right. Yeah, it's just the classic divide and conquer tactic by both uh, fascist capitalist parties, which is exactly what they are. As people that are funding fully in support of Zionism, they are literally funding fascism. Okay? Fascist nationalism. And that's what they're about here at home. And as a political parties that are bought and paid for by the ruling class, which means this is a plutocracy, which means that the capitalist system, the enterprises, the hedge fund managers, uh, the big CEOs are the ones that actually control the government. They buy the politicians, they pay off the politicians make the rules, to the convenience of the ruling class, and the working class pays for it. Why am I saying all this? Because it's that same process that uses the divide and conquer tactic on the working class to divide us from the working class immigrants, which are just normal people trying to survive like the rest of us. Why do they do this? Because they are still going to let immigrants in, whether we are for it or against it. They're just going to do it in their own way. They need they don't want to admit that they need immigrants for low-paying jobs. So they pull this whole "we're going to be hard on immigrants" tactics, where they're going to do things that are pretty much just the same as putting up signs or putting up walls, right? They're going to deport a few, but then they're going to let in a more few in a certain way. So it's like a show, right? They're always gonna need immigrants, especially because Americans aren't having babies. There's a shortage of babies, so they have to let them in. But for the purpose of elections, they create a boogeyman, right? Like the immigrants are the boogeyman, so you have to wait. You have to vote for us, so because we're going to resolve it. Um, but the immigrants aren't the problem. Imperialism is the problem. Capitalism is the problem. The ruling class is the problem. Their way of exploiting not only the working class abroad but at home is the problem. If you don't want people coming from abroad, then tell the United States, tell your representatives, tell everybody in charge that they needs to stop with the sanctions and with the embargoes and with the fear mongering and with the propaganda smearing of other nations and countries. For example, Venezuela. Take down the over 800 embargoes and sanctions that Venezuela has, and Venezuela will do fine in its own economic system, just like Vietnam does fine. The same with Cuba. Take it down. Take them off the terrorist list. Uh, if you don't, what's going to happen eventually is that we're going to have the multipolarity through the BRICS, anyways, where BRICS is going to create bridges with places that America doesn't want to, right? So eventually, Russia will be trading with Venezuela, and so will China. China already trades with the whole world. Um, this is a whole new world now of super information where everyone's going to be able to see the truth if they want to see it, and they're going to be able to trade one way or another if they see fit, right? The nations. So this is here. This is a downward spiral of the capitalist system in America. It's the empire crumbling on its own weight, and the American people see it. That's why the polls show that so many people are so dissatisfied with these two-party system, because all they really do is represent the ruling class and try to propagandize to fight within each other, to divide and conquer on the working class. But I think the people are catching on, and I think regardless of who wins this election, the left and the working class are going to be more united and more mobilized, and it's going to come to a boiling point, and eventually there's going to be a revolution, and the violence is going to be brought upon and created by the ruling class, as usual, as is historically proven, that they always resort to violence, authoritarianism, and fascism. That's why capitalism is fascism. Inevitably, it always leads to it, because the ruling class want to maintain their power, and they want to keep hoarding their wealth for their to pass it on multi-generationally. All right. So those are my thoughts on that. I had another thought too today that I was thinking about, how they in this article they say they resort to the police, right? The police are just a legalized gang like ICE. They are corrupt, a corrupt organization. And what's going to happen is same thing that's kind of happening in Peru, same thing that's happening in El Salvador. People are pleading for the police to take charge or to do something about it, right? But you don't understand that these people that you want to call criminals or illegals or whatever, uh, or people that are committing crimes, around your neighborhoods and stuff, they are your own children, your own relatives, your own cousins, your own nephews. And when you give full power to the state to be authoritarian, well, then they throw the laws out the window. There's no more judicial system. So what happens? They start throwing your kids into prisons without actual representation, without actual investigations or trials. So it goes full authoritarian, like Bukele did in El Salvador. And then everybody's crying about how their relatives are getting thrown into jails without a proper judicial process. And it's being done by the same people, it's the same corrupt people that actually were letting all these crimes happen in places like El Salvador, like the corrupt police that were getting paid to buy, per se, the criminals, so that they can look the other way. Uh, so don't forget, the actual crimes start at the top. They're not organized by the little man that's just trying to survive and trying to get his bread for the day. These crimes are exacerbated by systems of authoritarianism with a greedy ruling class that really exploits and dehumanizes the working class, the poorest working class, and tries to call them all criminals when you created the situations that turned them to a life of crime or a life of stealing or a life of extortion, right? Extortion, yes. Um, so this is what happens inevitably with capitalism. It leads to authoritarianism, fascism, and we can see it now. We can see now how cops are trying to silence leftists, trying to silence socialists, trying to silence activists, specifically how they're trying to silence people that are mobilizing to free Palestine. We're mobilizing for the freedom and the peace of humanity, so that Zionists stop colonizing Gaza, so that children aren't getting bombed or sniped in the head by ghouls. And here in the United States, the cops act like we're the anti-Semites when we are hand in hand with actual Orthodox Jews that don't want Zionism to do what it does in their name. Okay, so we are going to move along. Um, Hopefully, my videos aren't getting muted for saying things like that, but who knows? Um, let's see here. Hopefully, I'm not getting muted for stating facts, right? All right. So, yeah, this whole immigration process, it's such a psyop, the whole thing, right? The way they manipulate people uh, into thinking that the problem is immigrants, when the problem is really the ruling class that not only exploits people abroad, but the working class here as well. Okay. Okay. Let's move along here. I guess that's good. More militarization. Why is the government? All right. So I read that. I read this. Uh, Let me see. I think I only have 2 articles for today, so it's going to be a light day. Yeah. Okay. Let me check here again the audio. Make sure audio check 1 2 1 2. Audio is good. I love this little audio cam. It's great. It does the job. And I'm going to take a little break here to enjoy my cookie. Like I said, this is a light one today. There's only one more article. Uh, I can take my time, take a breather, and I should be done by 12:30 easy today then. That's a solid picture. I like that. Don't worry, I'll start reading in about a minute. If you're not aware, it's almost election season. It's almost election time. Uh, a lot of people have already gotten their mail-in ballots. Um, my suggestion: don't vote for Democrats or Republicans in anything. They're gonna lie to you. They're gonna give you they're gonna make promises that they're gonna break. Um, especially when it comes to your wages, when it comes to your human rights, when it comes to your benefits. Don't forget that we all deserve housing as a human right, food as a human right, healthcare as a human right, and education as a human right. In my book, these are things that we shouldn't commodify anymore. Why does it cost $300 to $500 to buy a college book? It's insane. I was talking to a friend yesterday that told me that she's in college and her book costs about $500. I remember when college books were $200, and even back then, I would buy them used or not buy them at all if I could. Uh, so just a tip there: always try to buy your college books used or passed down from other people. Usually, they're not always the same edition, but from one edition to the last, there's usually not much of a difference unless there was a huge what do you call it, revamp or restructuring of the lessons. Uh, but always talk to your teachers and be like, "Hey, teacher, I'm broke. I can't afford a new $500 book. Uh, is there a PDF version? Is there a used version that you recommend? Which can I get away with?" Uh, yeah, but some people just buy them. Some people just bite the bullet and buy the $500 book, assuming they're going to keep it for the rest of their lives, or assuming that they're going to pass it down or share it. I don't know. But don't, unless you plan on scanning that whole book for the benefit of everybody else to share it. I don't know. Unless you want to buy that book and share it with 5 people so you can have a full study group together. I don't know. It's still too expensive. $500 for a 1 pound book of notes when all the information is on the internet for free practically these days. Sounds absurd to me. But that's capitalism, right? Absurdity. All right. So let's move along to the next article. Capitalist plunder of the Amazon is what's driving U.S. hurricanes. Tina Landis, October 14th, 2024. All right. Photo is of Hurricane Milton over the Gulf of Mexico. Credit Flickr, NASA Johnson. Tina Landis is the author of the book Climate Solutions Beyond Capitalism. Great book, light read, I recommend it. Article reads as follows. No matter where you live on the globe, climate change is becoming increasingly apparent every day. From an unprecedented triple-digit heat wave in California earlier this month to the back-to-back hurricanes that pummeled the southeast, the extreme monsoon rains in India and extreme drought in the Amazon basin, climate change is undeniably and rapidly becoming more disastrous. Analysis from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found that climate change caused 50% more rainfall in Georgia and the Carolinas from Hurricane Helene and made the heavy rainfall 20 times more likely. World Weather Attribution analysis showed that the high ocean temperatures that fueled Hurricane Helene were 200 to 500 times more likely to occur due to climate change. Helene, which has left at least 250 dead, with hundreds more still missing, was followed just 2 weeks later by Hurricane Milton. CoreLogic estimated up to $47.5 billion in damages from wind and flooding across 16 states occurred on average around every 82 days in the United States in the 1980s. Between 2017 and 2022, these billion-dollar disasters rose to every 18 days. Profit-driven insurance companies are not only refusing coverage in disaster-prone states like California and Florida, But in the aftermath of recent disasters, they are finding ways to not pay or claim for those who do have coverage, leaving residents with little hope for recovery. Drivers of climate chaos. It is well understood that higher levels of carbon and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere create warming air and ocean temperatures. But that is the role of deforestation in warming and extreme weather. Excuse me, let me read that again. But what is the role of deforestation in warming and extreme weather? It may seem far away from the US Gulf Coast, but the weather patterns in the Atlantic are connected to the Amazon rainforest. Put simply, more trees means less energy to fuel storms. So as deforestation in the Amazon increases, so does the frequency and severity of storms forming in the Atlantic. Energy needed for storm formation not only draws from warm ocean waters, but new research shows that the power of a storm is determined by the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. The formation and strength of cyclones that form over the ocean require sufficient amounts of water vapor, with expansive intact forests shown to protect the region from these extreme storms. Large forests like the Amazon draw moisture away from the oceans to the land, and the atmospheric conditions over a forest absorb energy and slow winds. Let me read that one more time. Large forests like the Amazon draw moisture away from the oceans to the land, and the atmospheric conditions over a forest absorb energy and slow winds. As forests are cleared, this mechanism weakens as more moisture becomes available over the neighboring ocean, increasing the frequency and strength of storms. Not only does the Amazon rainforest impact Atlantic storms, but it is also responsible for 80% of the rainfall that occurs over the land of that region. Trees act as a biotic pump, releasing water vapor and microbes that seed cloud formation. As areas are clear cut or burned, these patches of bare earth create dying in the adjacent wooded areas, making the create drying in the adjacent wooded areas, making the area more vulnerable to fire. Bare soil, unlike vegetative cover, absorb the heat from the sun, adding to atmospheric warming and drying. As tree loss and global air temperatures increase, the likelihood of drought and fires in the Amazon have increased threefold, with the Amazon currently experiencing most severe droughts in 40 years. With the Amazon currently experiencing its most severe drought in 40 years. Although the deforestation rate has actually slowed slightly since 2022, the overall trajectory is still heading in a disastrous direction. Current estimates show that 17% of the Amazon basin has been deforested. A 20 to 25% forest loss is estimated to be the tipping point for the Amazon that will drive the tropical rainforest toward a grassland ecosystem, which would have catastrophic implications for global heating. So why is deforestation continuing to occur? What's driving it? Since the 1990s, the world has lost 1.3 million square kilometers of forest cover, mainly at the hands of 13 transnational corporations, including US-based corporations such as Cargill, BlackRock, Walmart, McDonald's, Starbucks, and Procter & Gamble. So far this year, 32 million acres in the Brazilian rainforest and Pantanal wetlands to the south have burned. The majority of these fires were set illegally to clear land for mining, logging, and agricultural corporations based in the global north, and further fueled by the drought, which caused many fires to spread out of control. Another path forward. Globally, indigenous held territories account for 20% of the Earth's landmass and hold 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. The ecological sustainable practice of indigenous communities are reflected in the lands they hold within the Amazon basin, which integrate the use of prescribed fire and have prevented devastating wildfires from occurring on their lands. A well-known indigenous leader in Brazil, Chief Raoni Metuktire, recently stated, quote, "White people are contributing to the destruction of the forest. I am very concerned with their way of life leading to the destruction of living beings and our planet, end quote. Raoni pointed to illegal extractive industries like mining, logging, and cattle ranching as a cause of the degradation of the rainforest that is depleting water resources, drying the land, and exacerbating climate change. Exacerbating climate change. You would think that the increasing urgency of the crisis would result in meaningful action from global North governments, who could seize the assets of these criminal corporations that are driving us to extinction. But instead, we see both the Republican and Democratic presidential candidates falling over themselves to pledge allegiance to fossil fuel industries by promising to ramp up oil and gas production at a time when U.S. crude oil production is already at an all-time high. Trump, of course, completely denies that climate change exists, and Harris has reversed her previous position to fully embrace the fracking industry, known for its extremely harmful extractive methods that use immense amounts of scarce fresh water, as well as releasing large amounts of climate warming methane in the process. The majority of natural gas that is extracted gets converted into liquefied form of shipping from the US to Europe and Asia, which is shown to have 33% more planet heating emission than coal over a 20-year period. The lack of action and negligence from the capitalist ruling elite is criminal. Not only are our so-called leaders enabling corporations to continue their plunder of the planet for short-term profits, they also do nothing to protect residents and provide little relief when disaster strikes. At the same time, that FEMA declares a $9 billion shortfall in funds to help devastated communities in the aftermath of Helene, the Biden administration handed over an additional $8 billion to fuel the war in Ukraine and another $8.7 billion to Israel to fund the genocide of Palestinian people. The corrupt and callous nature of the U.S. capitalist system could not be more clear. We can't look to these criminals to save us. There are real solutions to climate change that could be implemented immediately. We must organize ourselves to build a system that prioritizes the needs of the people and planet. That system is socialism. Under a socialist planned economy, we can utilize humanity's collective knowledge and resources to mitigate climate change, restore ecosystems, and protect people in advance of extreme weather. Only a handful of super rich that prefer self-enrichment over the survival of life on this planet stand in our way. But we are many and they are few, and we have the power when we are organized. We cannot become demoralized by the tragedies that we are witnessing, but instead funnel our grief and anger into action and end capitalism before it ends us. This leads back to what I was explaining in the article before, that the ruling class run the government, that this is a plutocracy, that the rich, the enterprises, the corporations buy our government leaders. They lobby them just like APAC does, just like Walmart does. They contribute to them, and then in return of favor, these government ghouls that we call misleaders or leaders or misleadership uh, change the laws to benefit the ruling class at the expense of the working class. And then they point at people like Trump saying he's a horrible person, or they point at migrants saying they're horrible people taking their jobs, or they point at Putin saying Putin is feeding you propaganda, when in reality, it is just a beta switch. It is just divide and conquer of the ruling class towards a working class. The working class needs to unite. We have more in common than differences. For example, over 70% of U.S. citizens support universal health care or Medicare, whatever you want to call it. Medicare for all. I call it universal health care, which is mean the coverage, uh, the nationalized and socialized coverage of medicine, uh, therapy, medical, dental, vision, uh, physical. It shouldn't be a for-profit system anymore. That's ghoulish. Uh, and so this is pretty much all I have to say. Uh, Yeah, there was only 2 articles for today. I'm sure they're going to ramp up and drop a lot of articles in the next couple of weeks for the elections. Uh, let's not forget, for those that care, and I hope all of you care, that there is still a genocide, a colonial apartheid, and genocide happening in the Middle East, being orchestrated by the Zios, uh, which are also fascists, which is being funded by places like the United States. And who supports them? Trump and Kamala support them, like Biden. And if you vote for Zionists, you're literally voting for fascist, genocidal fascists. So don't do it. Have some moral integrity. Reject the establishment, reject both candidates. And the best you can do is vote for the third party candidate that best aligns for you. But after that, which is the minimal, I would say, don't forget to vote, to study, to educate yourself, and to join an org to organize and mobilize the working class, which is going to be where historically the true change has always been, regardless of what party was in power. Also, don't forget as a voter to look over the referendums, the new laws. Those are very important to read over and understand that some of them are curtailed differently to benefit the ruling class over the working class. So study those very well and make sure that you're voting for laws that actually support the working class, voting for bills that support the working class, and voting against bills that hurt the working class for the benefit of the ruling class. Yes, so just be careful. Take your time voting. But most importantly, let's have some solidarity as a working class and educate, organize, and mobilize. That's it. Let me check if anything else popped up, perhaps while we were reading. Nope, nothing else for today. Maybe something will pop up later today. Um, yeah, so I was happy to read this. Let's see. The Prop 6 one for California last week was awesome. Yeah, that was a great article. Um, okay. Hopefully, maybe later this week, I will sit down and look over the initiatives, the bills for this area or for Massachusetts in general, and share some insight, share some input. I might actually just drop those on Mastodon. If anybody is not on Mastodon, get on Mastodon. They're an open source social media that doesn't drop ads because it's a nonprofit. So yeah, feel free to jump on there and get rid of your social media apps that bombard you with ads all the time, which is so annoying. Okay. All right. So everybody have a great rest of the weekend. Uh, yeah. And don't forget working class solidarity around the world. Borders are created by the ruling class for their